Sarah Johnson pulled her dark curly hair into a neat bun as she walked through the bright hallways of Atlanta General Hospital. It was another busy Tuesday morning in the rehabilitation wing, where she had worked as a nurse for the past 3 years. At 32, she had earned a reputation for being one of the most caring and patient nurses in the department. Her chocolate brown eyes always seemed to hold a gentle warmth that made patients feel at ease. That morning started like any other. Sarah checked her patient list and noticed a new name: Michael Thompson, room 405. The notes indicated he was a 34-year-old software engineer who had been transferred from the main hospital wing after a serious car accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. As Sarah approached room 405, she heard someone laughing. It surprised her. Laughter wasn't common in the rehabilitation wing, especially from new patients who were just beginning to cope with life-changing injuries. She knocked softly on the door before entering. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I'm Sarah, your nurse for this shift," she said, walking into the room. She found a man with friendly green eyes and light brown hair sitting up in his bed, talking to an elderly janitor who was mopping the floor. Both men were chuckling about something. "Please call me Michael," he replied with a warm smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "I was just telling Joe here about my failed attempt at making breakfast in bed for my mom when I was 10. Let's just say the fire department got involved." Sarah couldn't help but smile as she checked his vital signs. Most new patients she encountered were understandably depressed or angry, but Michael seemed different. Despite the obvious challenges he was facing, there was a spark of life in his eyes that caught her attention. While Sarah recorded his blood pressure and temperature, Michael asked her questions about the hospital and her work. His genuine interest in her answers made the routine checkup feel more like a friendly conversation. She learned that before his accident, he had been developing software for a company that created educational programs for children with special needs. "Well, I guess I'll be seeing things from the other side now," he said, gesturing to his legs. His voice held no bitterness, just a matter-of-fact acceptance that Sarah found remarkable. Throughout that first morning, Sarah found herself returning to room 405 more often than strictly necessary. Each time, Michael had something interesting to say or a question that showed he had been thinking about their previous conversation. He asked about her family. She was the youngest of 3 sisters. Her favorite books, mystery novels, and even her opinion on whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She was firmly against it. During lunch, when Sarah brought him his meal, she noticed him struggling with the hospital's plastic utensils. Without making a fuss, she quietly helped him adjust his grip and showed him a technique that some of her other patients found helpful. Instead of feeling embarrassed, Michael appreciated her practical approach. "You know," he said, successfully managing to eat his mashed potatoes, "most people either ignore the obvious difficulties or make such a big deal about helping that it becomes awkward. You have a gift for making it feel normal." Sarah felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. "It is normal," she replied simply. "Everyone needs help sometimes." As her shift continued, Sarah couldn't help but notice how Michael interacted with others. He thanked every staff member who entered his room, remembered their names, and always found a way to make them smile. Even when he was clearly in pain during his first physical therapy session, he maintained his positive attitude. Before she knew it, her shift was ending. As Sarah prepared to leave, she made one final stop at room 405 to check on Michael. She found him looking out the window, his expression more serious than it had been all day. "Everything okay?" she asked, concerned. Michael turned to her with a slight smile, "Just thinking about all the changes ahead. But you know what? Today wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. Thanks for that, Sarah." As Sarah walked to her car that evening, she realized something had shifted in her world. She had met hundreds of patients over the years, but something about Michael Thompson was different. His strength wasn't in pretending everything was fine, but in facing his new reality with grace and humor. Little did Sarah know that this ordinary Tuesday would later be marked as the day her life began to change in ways she never could have imagined. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself looking forward to her shifts at the rehabilitation wing more than ever before. Her connection with Michael grew stronger each day, though she tried to keep things professional. Other nurses started to notice how his face lit up whenever she entered room 405. One rainy afternoon, Sarah was helping Michael with his lunch when he suddenly asked, "Would you like to have coffee with me? You know, when I'm not stuck in this bed wearing this stylish hospital gown?" His voice was casual, but his hands fidgeted with the blanket. Sarah hesitated. Dating patients was against hospital policy, but Michael was scheduled to be discharged in 2 days. After a moment, she smiled and said, "I'd like that, but you'll have to wait until after you're discharged." That Saturday, they met at a small coffee shop near the hospital. Sarah wore a yellow sundress that complemented her dark skin, while Michael had dressed up in a blue button-down shirt, navigating his wheelchair with confidence. As they talked over steaming cups of coffee, neither noticed the curious glances from other customers. Their conversation flowed easily, jumping from favorite movies to childhood memories. Michael told her about growing up in Boston with his younger sister, while Sarah shared stories about her large, close-knit family in Atlanta. Time passed so quickly that they were surprised when the cafe owner started stacking chairs. However, reality soon crashed into their growing happiness. The following week, Sarah invited Michael to her family's Sunday dinner. Her parents, James and Dorothy Johnson, had always been protective of their youngest daughter, and this dinner proved challenging. "A wheelchair?" Her mother had whispered in the kitchen, while Michael chatted with Sarah's father in the living room. "Baby, are you sure about this? Life is already hard enough for a black woman in this world. Why add more challenges?" Sarah felt her temper rise but kept her voice low. "Mama, Michael is one of the kindest, most intelligent men I've ever met. His wheelchair doesn't change that." Meanwhile, Michael was facing his own family's reactions. During a video call with his parents in Boston, his mother's forced smile and father's uncomfortable questions revealed their unspoken concerns about their son dating a black woman. "Son, we just want what's best for you," his father said carefully. "You're already dealing with your situation. Maybe you should focus on your recovery first." Michael's response was firm. "Dad, Sarah is what's best for me. She sees me for who I am, not what I can or can't do. And if you're trying to say what I think you're trying to say about her race, we're going to have a serious problem." Despite these challenges, Sarah and Michael's relationship deepened. They found joy in simple things, watching movies together, Michael teaching Sarah basic coding, and Sarah introducing him to her favorite soul food recipes. Michael's sense of humor helped them navigate the daily challenges of his disability, while Sarah's practical nature found solutions to problems before they became issues. One evening, as they sat in Sarah's apartment, Michael spoke about his struggles with his family's subtle racism. "I never realized they had these prejudices," he said quietly. "I feel like I'm seeing them clearly for the first time." Sarah took his hand. "My mama always says people can surprise you, sometimes good, sometimes bad. What matters is how we handle it." Their love grew stronger as they faced each challenge together. When people stared at them in public, some because of Michael's wheelchair, others because of their interracial relationship, they learned to focus on each other instead of the onlookers. Sarah's younger niece, 6-year-old Tamika, helped break the ice with the Johnson family. She adored Michael's wheelchair races with her in the park and his funny stories. Seeing Tamika's pure acceptance of Michael gradually softened Dorothy's heart. By the end of their 3rd month dating, both Sarah and Michael knew they had found something special. Their relationship wasn't just about overcoming barriers or proving points to their families. It was about two people who truly understood and supported each other, who could laugh together during tough times, and who saw past the surface to what really mattered. As Sarah helped Michael into his car after another family dinner, he pulled her close and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me, just me." Sarah smiled, knowing that despite all the challenges they faced, she wouldn't want it any other way. 6 months into their relationship, Michael knew Sarah was the one he wanted to spend his life with. He spent weeks planning the perfect proposal, wanting to make it special despite his physical limitations. With help from his sister Rachel, who had finally come around to accepting Sarah, he set his plan in motion. On a warm Saturday morning, Sarah arrived at the Atlanta General Hospital's garden for what she thought was a charity event Michael had organized. She was wearing her favorite blue dress, her dark curls falling softly around her shoulders. As she walked through the garden entrance, she gasped. The entire garden had been transformed. White fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and rose petals made a path through the flowers. Photos of Sarah and Michael hung from ribbons on the branches. Their first coffee date, family dinners, park outings, and countless smiling selfies that told their story. At the end of the path, Michael waited in his wheelchair, wearing a crisp black suit. Behind him stood both their families, including those who had initially opposed their relationship. Sarah's mother Dorothy was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, while Michael's parents stood with nervous but genuine smiles. "Sarah," Michael called out as she approached, his voice full of emotion. "This garden is where we first really talked, remember? You found me here frustrated after my first week of therapy, ready to give up. You sat with me for your entire lunch break and told me about all your patients who never gave up. You made me believe in myself again." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as Michael continued. "Every day since then, you've shown me what true love means. You never saw my wheelchair as a barrier. You fought for us when others doubted. You love me for exactly who I am." With trembling hands, Michael pulled out a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Rachel stepped forward to help him maneuver his wheelchair into position, and together, they managed to create their version of getting down on one knee, Michael slightly tilting his wheelchair forward in a way they had practiced many times. "Sarah Johnson, would you make me the happiest man in the world and become my wife?" For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. She looked at the beautiful ring, at Michael's hopeful face, and at their families gathered together. She thought about all the obstacles they'd overcome, all the judgments they'd faced, and all the love they'd shared. "Yes," she finally managed to say through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The garden erupted in cheers as Sarah leaned down to kiss Michael. Her father James was the first to step forward, pulling them both into a hug. "I was wrong," he whispered to Michael. "You're exactly what my baby girl needs." Michael's mother Susan, who had once been so hesitant about their relationship, approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for loving my son," she said softly, "and forgive us for taking so long to see what he saw in you from the start." The celebration continued into the evening at Sarah's parents' house. The two families, once divided by prejudice and fear, now sat together sharing stories and laughter. Sarah's niece Tamika excitedly planned her flower girl dress, while Rachel and Sarah's sisters discussed bridesmaid details. Later that night, as Sarah and Michael sat quietly on her parents' porch swing, she asked, "Are you sure you're ready for all this? Marriage isn't going to be easy with everything we have to deal with." Michael took her hand, running his thumb over the engagement ring. "I'm sure about you, Sarah. The wheelchair, the stairs, the prejudices, those are just outside noise. What we have is stronger than all of that." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, knowing he was right. Their love hadn't grown despite their differences. It had grown because they had faced every challenge together, becoming stronger with each obstacle they overcame. As they sat there planning their future, neither Sarah nor Michael knew that their biggest challenge, and miracle, was still to come. But for now, they were content in the knowledge that love had prevailed over every barrier society had placed in their way. The stars twinkled above them, much like the fairy lights still hanging in the hospital garden where their journey had begun. Their story was proof that true love knows no boundaries, not of race, not of physical ability, not of society's expectations. It simply knows the truth of two hearts that beat as one. The wedding was beautiful in its simplicity. Sarah wore an elegant ivory dress that flowed gracefully as she danced with Michael in his specially decorated wheelchair for their first dance. Their families watched with teary eyes as the couple who had overcome so many obstacles began their new life together. 3 months after their honeymoon, Sarah and Michael moved into their new home, a modified ranch-style house that allowed Michael to move freely in his wheelchair. The house was their first big challenge as a married couple. While the real estate agent had assured them it was wheelchair-friendly, they quickly discovered many changes were needed. One Saturday morning, Sarah found Michael staring frustrated at the kitchen cabinets. "I can't reach anything above the second shelf," he said, trying to hide his disappointment. Without missing a beat, Sarah grabbed her toolbox, a wedding gift from her father, and spent the weekend lowering all the cabinet heights. Michael watched in amazement as his wife, still in her pajamas, reconstructed their kitchen. "Where did you learn to do all this?" he asked, handing her screws as she worked. Sarah grinned, her face smudged with dust. "YouTube tutorials. Plus, growing up with a daddy who fixed everything himself taught me a thing or two." Their daily routine took some time to perfect. Every morning, Sarah would wake up early to help Michael with his exercises before getting ready for her nursing shifts. Michael, now working from home as a software consultant, transformed their spare room into a home office where he developed programs for children with disabilities. Some days were harder than others. Like the morning Michael's wheelchair got stuck in their bathroom doorway, making him late for an important video meeting. Sarah had already left for work, and he had to call his neighbor for help. That evening, they sat down and created a detailed plan for handling similar situations. "We need to be smarter about this," Michael said, drawing up a list on his laptop. "I can't always depend on you being here, and you shouldn't have to worry about me when you're at work." They installed smart home devices that Michael could control from his phone. They labeled everything in the house and created backup plans for various scenarios. Sarah's organizational skills as a nurse combined perfectly with Michael's technical knowledge to make their home run smoothly. Their families, who had once been skeptical, now saw them as an inspiration. Sarah's mother, Dorothy, often dropped by with home-cooked meals, and during these visits, she noticed how perfectly her daughter and son-in-law complemented each other. Where Michael had trouble reaching something, Sarah was there to help. When Sarah was exhausted from a long hospital shift, Michael would make her laugh with his silly jokes and help her manage their household finances using his expert spreadsheets. One evening, as they sat on their adapted patio watching the sunset, Michael received an email that changed everything. A major tech company wanted to buy the educational software he had developed for children with disabilities. The offer was more money than either of them had ever imagined. "Sarah," Michael said, his voice shaking, "with this money, we could do so much. We could start that foundation we talked about, helping other couples like us." Sarah knelt beside his wheelchair and squeezed his hand. "See, this is why I married you. You're always thinking about helping others." Their first year of marriage brought its share of challenges. There were nights when Sarah cried in frustration after particularly difficult days at the hospital, and times when Michael felt guilty about the things he couldn't do. But they always found their way back to laughter. Like the time they tried to paint their bedroom and Michael accidentally rolled his wheelchair through the paint tray, leaving wheel tracks all over their hardwood floors. Instead of getting upset, Sarah grabbed the handles of his wheelchair and started creating patterns with the wheels, turning their floor into an abstract art piece that they eventually covered with a rug, their own private joke. As their first wedding anniversary approached, Sarah and Michael sat in their adapted kitchen, eating takeout Chinese food and planning their future. They had learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about finding solutions together, supporting each other's dreams, and turning challenges into opportunities for growth. Little did they know that life was about to surprise them in a way neither could have imagined. It started on a regular Tuesday evening, 3 years into their marriage. Sarah was preparing dinner while Michael worked in his home office when she heard him call out her name. Something in his voice made her drop the spatula and rush to him immediately. "Sarah," Michael said, his face pale with a mix of fear and confusion. I think I felt something in my legs, like a tingling sensation." He looked up at her, his green eyes wide. "I know it sounds crazy. The doctors said this would never happen." Sarah's nursing training kicked in. She knelt beside his wheelchair and pressed her hand against his right leg. "Tell me if you feel anything," she said, trying to keep her voice steady while her heart raced. She moved her hand down his leg, watching his face carefully. "There," Michael gasped. "I felt pressure when you touched my knee. It's faint, but it's definitely there." Tears formed in his eyes. "Sarah, am I imagining this?" Sarah spent the next hour testing different spots on his legs, carefully documenting every sensation Michael reported. As a nurse, she knew not to raise false hopes, but she couldn't ignore the signs. That night, neither of them slept much, both afraid this miracle might disappear by morning. The next day, they sat in Dr. Anderson's office at the Atlanta Medical Center. The neurologist had been treating Michael since his accident, and his expression was serious as he examined the test results. "This is remarkable," Dr. Anderson said, looking at the nerve response readings. "I've seen this happen only twice in my 20-year career. Some patients with spinal cord injuries can experience what we call incomplete paralysis, where some nerve pathways remain intact but dormant. In very rare cases, these pathways can begin to reactivate." Sarah gripped Michael's hand as the doctor continued explaining. The tingling sensations were a sign that some nerve connections were trying to rebuild themselves. However, Dr. Anderson warned them not to expect too much. "This doesn't mean you'll walk again, Michael," he said gently. "But it does mean there might be potential for some recovery. The extent of it is impossible to predict." On their drive home, Michael was unusually quiet. Sarah glanced at him worriedly. "What are you thinking about, honey?" "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared to hope too much. Scared to not hope enough. What if this is as good as it gets? What if we get our hopes up and nothing more happens?" Sarah pulled the car over and turned to face her husband. "Listen to me, Michael Thompson. Whether you never feel another sensation or end up running a marathon, nothing changes between us. We faced everyone who doubted our love, rebuilt our home, and created a beautiful life together. This is just another part of our journey." Over the next few weeks, they kept a detailed diary of every sensation Michael experienced. Sarah's medical knowledge proved invaluable as she helped document and understand each new development. The tingling became more frequent, and sometimes Michael could even feel temperature changes in his legs. One evening, as Sarah was helping Michael with his regular physical therapy exercises, something extraordinary happened. As she lifted his right leg, his foot twitched slightly. It was barely noticeable, but they both saw it. Did that just happen?" Michael whispered, staring at his foot in disbelief. Sarah nodded, unable to speak through her tears. They sat together on the exercise mat, holding each other and crying, tears of joy, fear, hope, and overwhelming love. The news spread quickly through both families. Sarah's mother, Dorothy, organized a prayer circle at her church. Michael's parents flew in from Boston to see for themselves, watching in amazement as their son demonstrated the small but significant changes in his condition. Dr. Anderson recommended they join an experimental treatment program at the hospital. It would be intensive, expensive, and there were no guarantees. But for the first time in 3 years, there was hope, real, medical hope, for some recovery. That night, as they lay in bed discussing their options, Michael turned to Sarah with tears in his eyes. "You know, when I married you, I thought you were the biggest blessing I could ever receive. But you just keep bringing miracles into my life." Sarah kissed him softly. "Maybe this is the universe's way of rewarding your beautiful heart," she said. "Now rest up, because starting tomorrow, we got a whole new challenge to face together." Neither of them knew exactly what the future held, but they knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything else, side by side, with unwavering love and determination. The experimental treatment program was more challenging than either Sarah or Michael had imagined. Every Monday through Friday, they arrived at the hospital's rehabilitation center at 7 a.m. sharp. The schedule was grueling, but Michael's determination never wavered. Dr. Rodriguez, the program's lead specialist, had warned them about the difficult road ahead. "Think of it like teaching a baby to walk," she explained during their first session. "Except your body has forgotten everything it once knew. We'd have to rebuild those connections from scratch." Sarah had taken a 3-month leave from her nursing job to support Michael through the initial phase of treatment. Every morning, she helped him through the basic exercises they'd been taught. Some days, the progress was so small it was hardly noticeable. Michael would spend an hour just trying to wiggle his toes, sweat dripping down his face from the effort. "I can't do this," he said one particularly frustrating morning, after 2 hours of trying to move his right leg. "Maybe we're fooling ourselves." Sarah knelt in front of him, her dark eyes fierce with determination. "Remember what you told me when your parents didn't approve of us dating? Nothing worth having comes easy. This is no different. We'll try again tomorrow." The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday, 6 weeks into the program. During his therapy session, Michael suddenly felt a strong sensation in his right thigh. Before anyone could react, his leg jerked forward slightly. Not just a twitch, but an actual movement. The therapy room erupted in cheers. Sarah, who had been watching from the corner, ran to Michael's side, tears streaming down her face. Even Dr. Rodriguez looked emotional as she documented the movement. "This is significant progress," she explained, trying to contain her excitement. "The neural pathways are definitely regenerating. But remember, we still have a long way to go." The small victory energized Michael. He threw himself into his exercises with renewed vigor. Sarah created a chart on their bedroom wall, marking every new achievement, no matter how small. First, it was the leg movement. Then, 2 weeks later, he gained some feeling in his left foot. Each tiny step forward was celebrated like a major triumph. Their families rallied around them. Sarah's sisters took turns bringing meals and helping with housework. Michael's parents paid for a specialized physical therapy machine he could use at home. Even their neighbors pitched in, with Mr. Jenkins from next door building a ramp with adjustable inclines for Michael's practice sessions. But the hardest parts happened when no one was watching. Late at night, when Michael's muscles screamed in pain from the day's exercises, Sarah would massage his legs, singing softly the way her grandmother used to do when she was sick. On mornings when the frustration felt overwhelming, Michael would tell Sarah stories about the future he saw for them, helping her remember why they were fighting so hard. 3 months into the program, during a regular assessment, Dr. Rodriguez shared unexpected news. The nerve regeneration in Michael's legs was progressing faster than anyone had predicted. While he still couldn't stand or walk, he had regained significant sensation in both legs and could move them voluntarily, though the movements were small and required intense concentration. "I've never seen anything quite like this," Dr. Rodriguez admitted. "Your body's response to the treatment is extraordinary. But more than that, your dedication to the process is remarkable." That evening, as they sat in their backyard watching the sunset, Michael reached for Sarah's hand. "Thank you," he said softly, "for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Sarah squeezed his hand. "That's what we do. We believe in each other." She paused, then added with a smile, "Besides, you're doing all the hard work. I'm just your personal cheerleader." Michael laughed. "The best cheerleader in the world. Although maybe you should get some pom-poms." Their laughter was interrupted by a sensation that made Michael gasp. Without any conscious effort on his part, his left leg had shifted slightly. It was the first completely spontaneous movement since his accident. Sarah grabbed their progress journal and recorded the moment, her hands shaking with excitement. As she wrote, Michael watched her with tears in his eyes. This amazing woman had stood by him through everything, never wavering, never complaining. And now, together, they were witnessing what doctors had once called impossible. The road ahead was still long, but with each passing day, their hope grew stronger. What had started as a tiny tingling sensation was slowly but surely turning into one of the greatest comeback stories either of them had ever known. 8 months into the treatment program, Sarah decided to start documenting their journey on social media. She created an account called steps_with_Michael and posted their first video. Michael moving his legs while lying on their exercise mat, his face beaming with pride. Neither of them expected what happened next. Within days, the video went viral. Thousands of comments poured in from around the world. Messages of support, stories from other couples facing similar challenges, and countless prayers and well wishes. "Look at this one," Sarah said one evening, showing Michael her phone. "It's from a woman in Texas whose husband was also told he'd never walk again. She says our story gives her hope." Michael smiled, still amazed at how their private journey had touched so many lives. As Michael's progress continued, Sarah kept updating their social media. She captured the moment he first moved both legs together, the day he managed to sit on the edge of the bed without support, and their tears of joy when he could feel the warm water during his hydrotherapy sessions. Dr. Rodriguez had become their biggest supporter. "What you two are achieving is remarkable," she told them during a checkup. "It's not just the physical recovery, it's your attitude, your love for each other. You're showing people what's possible when you don't give up." Then came the day that changed everything. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard a loud thump followed by Michael's voice calling her name. Her heart racing, she ran to their bedroom, expecting the worst. Instead, she found Michael gripping the parallel bars they had installed beside their bed. He was standing, actually standing, though his legs trembled with the effort. Sarah froze in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth. "Quick," Michael said through gritted teeth. "Get your phone. People need to see this." With shaking hands, Sarah recorded as Michael took his first supported stand in over 3 years. The video showed his determination, the sweat on his forehead, and the moment his face lit up with pure joy. In the background, you could hear Sarah's muffled sobs of happiness. Within hours, the video had millions of views. News stations started calling. Their story was featured on local news, then national programs. People were captivated by the black nurse and her disabled husband who had defied medical odds through love and determination. The attention brought unexpected opportunities. A medical equipment company offered to sponsor Michael's continued treatment. A publisher reached out about turning their story into a book. But what touched them most were the messages from other couples. "Your love story is breaking down so many barriers," one comment read. "You're showing the world that neither race nor disability can limit true love." Sarah and Michael used their new platform carefully. They started a blog sharing detailed information about Michael's treatment, hoping to help others in similar situations. They were honest about the hard days too, the setbacks, the frustrations, and the tears. One morning, during a regular therapy session, Michael surprised everyone. With Sarah on one side and his therapist on the other, he took his first unassisted step. It was small, shaky, and required incredible effort, but it was a real step. The video of this moment, captured by another patient's family member, spread across the internet like wildfire. In it, you could see Sarah's face radiating joy as Michael moved his foot forward. The look they shared afterwards spoke volumes about their journey together. That evening, as they celebrated with a small gathering of family and friends, Michael raised his glass from his wheelchair, which he now used much less frequently. "To my wife," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When I met you, I thought being able to walk again would be the greatest miracle of my life. But I was wrong. Finding you, loving you, and being loved by you, that's the real miracle." Sarah wiped away tears as she kissed him. Their families watched with proud smiles, remembering how far they had come from the days when they adopted this relationship. Later that night, as they looked through the thousands of supportive messages on their social media, Sarah turned to Michael. "You know what all these people see in our story?" "What's that?" he asked. "They see that love doesn't just survive challenges, it thrives on them. Every obstacle we've faced has only made us stronger." Michael squeezed her hand, knowing that their journey was far from over. But now they weren't walking this path alone. They were inspiring others to believe in miracles, in love, and in the power of never giving up. 5 years after their first meeting at Atlanta General Hospital, Sarah and Michael walked hand in hand through the same halls where their story began. This time, Michael wasn't a patient. He was walking on his own, using just a cane for support. The nurses who had known them from the beginning stopped to hug them, some wiping away tears at the sight. They were there for a special reason. The hospital had invited them to inaugurate the Thompson Johnson Rehabilitation Center, a new wing dedicated to helping patients with spinal cord injuries. The center was partially funded by the foundation they had started with the money from Michael's software company and their viral social media success. "Remember room 405? Sarah asked as they passed by. Michael smiled, squeezing her hand. "How could I forget? That's where I fell in love with my nurse. Even though I pretended to just be really interested in hospital policies," he chuckled. The inauguration ceremony was packed. Local news cameras rolled as Michael stood at the podium, Sarah by his side. Their families sat in the front row. Sarah's mother Dorothy dabbing her eyes with a tissue, while Michael's parents beamed with pride. The journey had transformed them all. "5 years ago, I lay in this hospital, being told I would never walk again," Michael began his speech. "But something more important than walking happened here. I met the woman who would change my life forever." He turned to Sarah, his eyes shining. "She didn't just see a man in a wheelchair, she saw me. And together, we saw possibilities where others saw limitations." The new rehabilitation center was special. It wasn't just about physical therapy. It included counseling services for interracial couples facing challenges, support groups for families adjusting to life with disabilities, and a state-of-the-art research facility studying nerve regeneration. After the ceremony, they hosted a small celebration in the hospital garden, the same garden where Michael had proposed. Dr. Rodriguez, who had guided them through Michael's recovery, raised a toast. "Sarah and Michael's story isn't just about a miraculous recovery," she said. "It's about breaking barriers. They showed us that love doesn't see color or disability. They proved that with determination, support, and love, the impossible becomes possible." Their social media following had grown to over 2 million people. The blog they started now helped thousands of couples navigate similar challenges. They received letters daily from people sharing their own stories of hope and healing. One special surprise came that day. A young interracial couple who had followed their story online approached them. The man was in a wheelchair, his girlfriend standing beside him with tears in her eyes. "You gave us courage," the woman said. "When our families said it would be too hard, we showed them your videos. You made us believe in our love." That evening, after everyone had left, Sarah and Michael sat on a bench in the hospital garden. Michael had walked the entire day with his cane, something that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Sarah asked, laying her head on his shoulder. "What's that, love?" "That we never let anyone else define our relationship. Not my family, not yours, not doctors, not strangers on the street. We wrote our own story." Michael nodded, thinking about their journey. Their foundation had already helped 20 couples with similar situations. The rehabilitation center would help hundreds more. Their story had been featured in medical journals, and Michael's recovery was being studied to help other patients. "And we're just getting started," he said, pulling out an envelope from his jacket. "Remember that children's book series we talked about? The publisher loved our idea. They want us to write stories for kids about different kinds of love and different kinds of families." Sarah's eyes lit up. They had dreamed of finding ways to help children understand that love comes in all forms. Now they could share their message with the next generation. As they walked out of the hospital, together, step by step, they passed the nurse's station where they had first met. The new nurse sitting there smiled at them, not knowing she was watching two people who had changed countless lives through their love story. "Ready to go home?" Michael asked, standing tall with his cane. Sarah took his free hand, remembering the journey that had brought them here. From their first meeting in room 405 to this moment, their love had only grown stronger. They had faced every challenge together, broken down barriers, and inspired others to do the same. "Home," Sarah said softly. "With you, I'm always home." They walked out into the sunset, their shadows merging into one on the pavement behind them. Their story had come full circle, but in many ways, it was just beginning. They had shown the world that true love knows no boundaries, that miracles happen every day, and that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that overcome the greatest challenges.